Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. In this episode, I sit down with Henry, a tech recruiter with a ton of experience and is really, really smart. What's even more important, though, is he genuinely wants to help people out. We sat and talked for over an hour, but I chopped this interview down to a 20-minute segment that has the most action-packed pieces that I genuinely think will help you out in your search to get your first or your next job. A lot of what we hear on the internet is based on our own anecdotal evidence, me included, where we talk about what worked for us or what we think is going on. But what happens when you send your resume or your application into that black void? Hopefully this interview will shed some light on that, some mistakes that I think a lot of us are making, how to avoid them, and how to generally have a better chance at luck when you're playing the interview game. Without further ado, let's get right into it. I speak almost exclusively to software engineers, and the number one question is, of course, how do I get hired? Right? Like, what do I got to do? How do I get hired? And I tell them kind of what I think, but at the same time, I know that like I'm not a recruiter. I've never been one. And a lot of times I feel like, is this, I know it's worked for me, but at the same time, I know there's like kind of a black box on the other end of where you send your resume, and recruiters in general have been the way I've gotten to most of my jobs. When I think about all the jobs, the last 5 jobs I've got have all been directly through recruiters. I don't think I've really done like a cold apply and gotten anywhere. And I'm curious, I want to know a lot more about that side of the game. Like just personally, like how did that all work? Like you're a recruiter, you've done that for a while. So I'm kind of hoping you can shed some light to me and our respective audiences on like, how does this work? How does the game of hiring work, and why is it broken? Because it feels pretty broken right now in some ways.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, no, yeah. This is if you got 3 hours, I can tell you everything. So I come across the same issue even as a candidate when I was looking for work. Right.
Yeah.
The overarching theme is you've got to network, right? You've got to do good work. You've got to meet friends. But how do you do that, right? And there's also, you've got to update your resume for every, role you're applying to. How do you do that? You've got to reach out to hiring managers and coding it out. How you do that? There's so many ways of doing it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think any which way is right or wrong. I think there's a lot of luck involved, timing, market and macroeconomics, all of that, especially in tech, right?
Yeah.
So I guess what it boils down to is if you're fresh out of a coding program or college, right? What you don't want to do is say, hey, can you look at my resume, right? That's a kind of a thing that over time will be just dismissed, especially with folks like myself who've been in it for a while. Okay. It's not that we don't want to. Mm-hmm. It's like in our careers, we have all these other things going on outside of resume reviews and helping folks with their resume previews. Nowadays, when people ask me, I say, hey, I can do it for you, but I'm going to use ChatGPT and I'm going to show you how to do it on that. Right? I think that's
really smart. That's kind of a nice way to do it. Like teach a man how to fish, right? Type of thing.
Yeah. And I think there's one thing I think folks get really good at is just having conversations, because that'll prepare you to tell your story in an interview. And if the interview doesn't go well, you have a network connection. And this quick story here, someone by the name of Johannes, I interviewed at his company, Afresh. He was the chief of staff. This was 2020. Okay. I didn't make the cut, but I loved the experience so much. We stayed in touch. And 4 years later, I may be helping him get hired somewhere else. We've never met in real life, but just that one conversation. Yeah. So those all add up, right? I think the resume thing, I would outsource that to AI or someone that writes really well.
That's what I tell people nowadays. I'm like, get a professional, because I'm like, I don't want to spend time doing this. I want to focus on the technical portion of the interview, the stuff I'm actually going to get judged on, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the communication style, the email follow-ups, hey, it's been a few days. How should we approach this? Persuasion there. There's a sales tactic there as well. Mm-hmm. And not to say you need to learn all of those things, but understand that the black box is not just the ATS, because there are humans, looking at your resume. The black box is how many emails is the recruiter getting every day, which meetings they're in. Outside of interviews, we're meeting with hiring managers. We have our own team meetings. We have meetings with additional stakeholders. We have meetings where we're training people how to, interview. And oftentimes recruiting, the function itself, runs lean, right? It's like, hey, it can't be that hard. Right. You do this, and this. But if you look at recruiting from a platform perspective, there's the sourcing, there's the inbound, there's the agencies we work with. That has to be, productized and systemized and like refined. Then there's the interviewing portion for the candidates. That has to be like top tier, because if you don't do well, the word gets out. This is a crappy company. Don't interview with them.
Yeah.
It becomes extra hard, right? So there's this initial life cycle. And from there, you have to be so careful from a company perspective on how you treat folks. Because if you get to the end stage and you're not selling the company as a solution to this individual's career, like, hey, I want to do this. This is my career. If I can do that here, fantastic. If I get paid certain band, that'd be the perfect fit. And if this person's in 4 or 5 different conversations, now we've spent 30 hours with this individual.
Yep.
And cannot offer them what they want for their career, because we all have, a trajectory. We don't necessarily want to be put into a mold, I think, nowadays, with all these side gigs and, Justin Welsh leading the way on this leadership stuff.
That's right.
It's, that's my long answer, man. It's just so hard. I think, again, just have conversations, and people like yourself, myself, that are open to like these types of chats. These things have led me to multiple opportunities across my career, whether it's getting hired fractionally, new opportunities I've never even heard of, because you can only research so much, right?
That's right.
You only have so much time in the day. And yes, do the hobbies thing, learn something new, just talk to people. That's the simplest thing I can maybe suggest here. So, I'll pass it back to you, dude. Like, what are your thoughts there?
On the hiring? Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, you gave me a bit of a different perspective too, because sometimes I feel like I forget that you're right. There's humans on the other end of this. I do see, like, I had a really weird experience recently, which kind of showed me a lot of how much I think the process is a bit broken. And this is just I'm extrapolating maybe too much from this experience, but it seems like to me that there's a wave of AI candidates, people that are using AI to spam essentially companies. And some companies trying to fight back by using AI to also then filter. So I had this interview 8 months ago with a company I shall not name, right? And they sent me a peer review to do. I did the peer review. It was immediately rejected. I went on Glassdoor. I saw this. Thousands of people had this experience. I'm like, there's no way I have humans reviewing thousands of these. I said, okay, I forgot about it. It's one of the many rejections I'll get. Not a big deal. They called me up 2 weeks ago. Said, hey, we made a big mistake. We've been auto rejecting people. We haven't found any candidates, and we've made a big mistake. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. You're correcting that. But I'm like thinking that was 8 months ago. This is not a good process.
Sticking to the choir, man.
Yeah, like this can't work. And because I feel like there's I've been on the hiring side too. And I was an engineering manager and I was hiring people. And it wasn't like we had a flood of bad candidates, but it wasn't like we had a flood of great candidates. And then we'd go through like a 7-round interview process. And I'm like, why are we doing 7 rounds of interviews? Do we really need to do this? And we'd lose candidates in the thing. But yeah, like kind of echoing what you said, I see a big portion of this, something I didn't take seriously for a long time, is the networking. And it feels almost cliche to say that because I feel like everybody says it, but the way you do it, of course, is way more important than just like the idea of networking. Because now I've learned to like it, like talking with you, like meeting you. We had shared interest. You have an interesting story. I'm like, oh, cool. I genuinely want to know more about that and speak with you. And I've met so many people online just from being curious and starting conversations. It can start from like a comment under a post. Like, that's how we got on this podcast, actually. Yeah. It was a comment. And then like next thing you know, we're speaking and having a good time and learning about each other. So that's the thing. I think genuine curiosity leads to these actual relationships or connections you can make, and who knows where they lead to. They can lead to a job. They can just lead to interesting conversations, all sorts of things. I've kept in contact with a few recruiters over the years, which has been really cool. Because sometimes I've spoken to people that I talked to years ago. I think the last role I had, it was a short contract. I got laid off last year too, in the middle of last year, and immediately I found a job really quickly, very lucky, but also because I kind of have a built-in network at this point, and it was much easier. I didn't apply really. The jobs I applied to, I never heard back from, but through the recruiter, quickly got a job. Then after that contract, I got into another role. I kind of want to pivot into this question though, because this is having you as a recruiter. This is really interesting because there's a narrative out there online that there's like too many people out there going for the same roles, and it's like that recruiters are just overwhelmed by a breadth, a massive amount of these really great candidates, and now they're just getting to pick and choose. Is that true? Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode, and if you're interested in becoming a software developer, learning how to build complex software, and actually get hired, join me at Parsity.io. If you're serious about joining, just schedule a call with me by clicking the link in the show notes below.
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, if you think about just the sheer number of folks that are applying to a role, right? Just to this day, I don't think I've seen a report come out of an ATS that tells anything other than like time to hire, right? The only things we look for is how fast we're hiring. A couple stories here. So this is almost 6-7 years ago at Crunchyroll, hosted a role for data scientists. In the first 24, 36 hours, 250 applications. And I knew that was going to happen because it's a lot, right? So that does happen, which is fine. What a lot of folks are what the narrative is out there, like, oh, recruiters have to look at these resumes one by one because that's what we do. We want to be fair. We want to do things right. And that's the correct answer, right? The better answer is if the resume is written in text, there's got to be a way to search through this text without having to look through every person's resume, right? And I'm talking very specific technical roles like engineering or anything outside of that. Maybe you'd have to like read into the story. If it's a marketing role, obviously there's more tech involved. Sure. There's tooling, but there's also like verbiage you can't really scan for without looking at it directly. When I say scan for, I don't mean like using a tool or bot. I mean like
humanized.
Command F. Right. Well, almost keyword search. Yeah. Command F. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I was using Greenhouse at Crunchyroll and I made a bet on myself. I bet out of 250 resumes, there'll be less than 15 that have the qualifications that are on the JD, right? So you can point fingers at the candidate not reading the JD or the JD's written poorly, the hiring team sucks. We point fingers at everyone, but whatever. Yeah. You're not going to be able to solve those or you have no control of those. But of the 250 candidates, I closed the roll off after 3 days. I did a Boolean search and I made sure to include every single key, every single skill set, whether it's, Python, any data engineering or data science, tools and methodologies, pulled up about 12 folks. I didn't even think about it. Auto emailed, hey, thanks for applying. We'd love to meet you. Imagine being a candidate applying within 24 hours, you get a request to have a chat. That's an amazing experience already, right?
For sure.
So if you join that conversation on LinkedIn, like recruiters have too much to do, is one, we're not doing it efficiently. If you think about it, if you're going to read the resume and all that, but know that there's a trade-off, right? You're going to be pulled into a meeting. You're going to have an interview to go to. So what's the best case scenario here? If you think about data structures and algorithm, like if there's a brute force method that takes the longest, or you can, I think it's called merge sort, where you can kind of split things.
Like divide and conquer.
You divide and conquer, yeah. So in my mind, I was like, I haven't objected to hire this candidate in 30 days. How do I do it and still be fair? So I relied on Boolean searches. Nowadays, if I were to have the same scenario, I would just have ChatGPT write a Boolean search for me. Same thing, but have it right. Take the job description that we have. Hey, GPT, write up a Boolean search for me to input into my Lever database or my Ashby database or my Greenhouse database, and then output the resumes that match. That's all we're doing is we're looking for keywords. We're looking for some phrases and stories.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And I'm going to die on this hill. If you say you're reading every single resume end to end for a single role,
it's probably all you're doing.
It's probably all you're doing. And it's a very antiquated process, right? There's no speed. That's the brute force method. There's no speed involved. And speed is one of the best, the most advantageous thing you can do for a candidate. Quickly make a decision.
100%. Yeah, it's better than 8 months, right?
Exactly.
Call somebody back 8 months. Hey, my bad. Do you want to interview now? I'm like, well, not really.
No, like it's going to be like.
It's kind of weird.
So that's my answer to that conversation has been going on for decades. Like,
jeez, that was really insightful. Actually, to you, that probably is like something. Oh, that's normal. That gave me a whole different mental model for what you're doing. that I never would have. I knew something like that was probably happening, but I didn't know, to be honest. I worked with a recruiter when I was working at a big company, and I was hiring, and she would send me some resumes. We'd get like 300 candidates. And then somehow she would send me like 20. I'm like, I don't know how you did that. I don't know where these 20 appeared from. And I didn't ask, which I probably should have. I should have been more curious, but I was busy with my own stuff. And then I'd get 20 on my desk, and then I would go through them one by one and actually read through them. But she was doing that initial filtering for me before I ever saw them, which was interesting. And I wonder if she was doing something similar to what you did. Very
I think her approach could have been along the lines of, when you hire a recruiter, and let's say I'm new to Parsity, and this is like a 200-person organization. I have a sliver of time to gain your trust.
Yeah.
And that's the first 2 weeks. Through emails, introductions, Slacks, however my communication is, my work style, my documentation. That's for me to prove to you that I'm going to be a good recruiter and good partner. And on that same note, caveat is you're always in an interview. You're always interviewing. Your work is a representation of you and who you're going to keep in contact with after X company, right? So what I typically like to do is when I go through the resumes, if there's any resumes I'm unsure of, I would tag the hiring manager in the database. Hey, I'm unsure about this part of the resume. What do you think? And 9 times out of 10, they'll come back like, oh, they're actually pretty good. Let's talk some at least, because even though, this is the hiring manager speaking, although we're kind of concerned about this area, let's just have a chat with them. Yeah. 9 times, obviously, as a hiring manager as well, you kind of want to be empathetic because you understand, people deserve opportunities and recruiters are more the gatekeepers. And what I think she did was she knew well enough and she's experienced enough and trusted her gut that these people are going to work well here, right? We read through it, we see kind of some signals around, I don't want to say pedigree, but the way things are written, the way the story is told, technologies, the schools, all that comes into play into like one big product, right? Let's say if the resume is a product, if it's done really well, we move it forward because we know you're going to be delighted reading the resume, right? So there's this continual transactional experience. So it's probably what she did. Whether it was a Boolean search, which I'm assuming it was, or some tool. Our
but
job is to
filter this massive amount. That's funny. I'm pretty impressed that you knew about merge sort too. That was a pretty accurate way of describing it. Dental study.
Yeah.
You're
on that note
not your average recruiter.
Right on. Yeah, I enjoy this too much, I guess. But on that same note, there could have also been questions in the application process for that data science role. For that data science role, I had a question. Do you have 4+ years of experience in these technologies?
Yeah.
If folks had answered no, it would auto tag them with too junior.
Gotcha. Yeah.
If folks had answered yes, would tag them strong candidate. So in that same Boolean search, I can actually just do a tag search in Lever or at the time the Screenhouse, and it pulled up all the candidates that were tagged strong. So I knew that it was using Greenhouse as an assistant to myself in my eyes. And I would review them, right? If there was only 4 or 5 that were strong candidates, I would review them like, cool, yep, this sounds good. This looks good. Check to see if they need a visa or not, check to see if anything was off with the tenure. Because if they answer 4+ years and it's only like an intern, that's my fault, right?
Yeah,
I got to check that real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
So just 2 things, inbound questions that actually make sense for us to sort in the back end, and then using Boolean to quickly take 250 down to 12. Yeah. And then the cool thing is email all of them. They have a great experience up front. Hiring manager gets their resumes within, 48 hours. Everyone's happy, right? We're just now having to massage the situation because Murphy's Law is going to come up. Someone's going to miss an interview. Someone's going to be rescheduled. Yeah. There's going to be a referral coming in from the CEO that you have to take the call no matter what, regardless if they're good or not. All that stuff happens in life. So just gotta get ready for it.
I got to ask you one last, I know we're coming up on time, but I got to ask you one last thing. What's like the biggest mistake you see candidates make when it comes to either resumes or the initial screening phone call?
Top of my head, first of all, I don't care if it's 1, 2, 3 pages, right? The hero section, right? That's what I call it, the hero section. On the resume, the first half have to be inviting, have to give me the information I initially want, what company you're working at. And Sam Struan does a really good job at this, explaining on his LinkedIn profile. wherever you worked, how long you worked there, what tools, technologies you use, what you solve for. If I can initially look at the first half of the first page and see everything I need, then now I'm locked in. I'm going to go down to the next experience. Okay, cool. I see, certain acronyms in Python. Okay, cool. Then I go down to the third. And then at the same time, I'm adding up years of experience in that resume. And then I go to the second page. I see if they have hobbies, type of education. Education is typically, okay, cool. They went to school. You know what I mean? But if there's something like, they double undergrad at Harvard, and went to Columbia, then I'll look deeper into that, like why they do that, right? What else they study that may be adjacent. But at the end of the day, second web page, hero section, maybe testimonials or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And that's what really gets me spending more time on a resume. So in order for me to do that well, though, the font has to be big enough. And that's the one thing I would just say. Font size matters. Line spacing matters. Indentation matters. Neatness and readability matters. If you think about when you're writing code, right? If it's all mashed up together, it's going to be like, I don't want to.
For sure. Like using a linter obviously is like, you have to have it formatted. Yeah. I didn't think about this, but yes, that's a really good point.
And that's how I screen resumes. And folks will tell you, like, we spend most time at the top left corner, the heat map says this, and it's really, again, if the job is Python developer and your title says, solutions architect, what are we doing here? I'm going to automatically pass. But you have Python experience 5 years ago, like, in bottom line up front, right? That was a military term, BLUF, bottom line up front. What's the most important thing you can share with the reader? Okay. The very top. And it's not like an elite thing, right? It's like, if you're communicating nowadays digitally, we're competing with Instagram, we're competing with LinkedIn. Like, if you want someone to read your stuff, let them know what's going on there. So that's what I would say as far as the application resume process. And this goes with how anyone in their entire career. If you were just out of college or out of coding program, make it compelling to read, no gimmicks, nothing about, I don't know, why am I saying Roblox? I don't know, but just no gimmicks, straightforward.
Gotcha.
Just the resumes are readable, the font's large enough. And I think folks will understand, like, there's the whole idea about don't use Comic Sans, but there's also like another idea, like don't use any of those other fonts have their own emotions, right? If you study that in style guides and design, you'll understand which fonts to use. Calibri, Arial, Times New Roman, it was a bit, 1990s, but it's readable. Some folks prefer that. And the second piece in interviews, here's my best advice I always tell folks. If it's on a phone call, take it standing up and walking around so you can breathe. It's a sales call, right? You're going to pitch yourself. Need to smile over the phone. People can definitely, feel you smiling. The energy changes. Yes. It changes incrementally. And when you're walking around and also have earbuds wired if possible. I wouldn't do Bluetooth if you can avoid it. And as you're walking around, you're pacing and they ask you, tell me about yourself. You're not sitting down. There's energy moving through the conversation. And I 100% guarantee you the other person on the phone can feel the energy, can feel you smiling. And you may have been likely the only person that day of the 5 or 6 conversations that did that. Now you're moving to the next round. There's an element of emotion and body language that people don't talk about often. So resumes, readability, interviews, you've got to be like you're selling something. So
you got too much game, dude. You got to.
This is why we're here, man. I'm trying to share.
That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. If you're serious about switching careers and becoming a software developer and building complex software and want to work directly with me and my team, go to Parsity.io. And if you want more information, feel free to schedule a chat by just clicking the link in the show notes. See you next week.